Hello, I'm Colin Green, and you are listening to Spike Pit. Well, folks, can't take too much credit for this show. Got an awesome bunch of call-ins from various gaming luminaries. We've heard from Goblins Henchman, he's called in. We've got Joe Salvador of Raven God Games. We have got Joe Richter of Hindsightless, Jason of Nerds RPG Variety Cast, Menion, aka Rob of Confessions of a Wee Timorous, Bushi. What else we got? We've got Rich Fraser from Cockatree Snuggets, BJ Boyd, the Arcane Alienist, Carl Rodriguez, the geomologist himself, and who else? I think that's about it, and that's quite a lot, guys. I'm amazed, and I hope you enjoy listening to all this discussion of recent topics. There's some great ideas and quite a lot to think about in this one. I will butt in as appropriate and give some commentary on my thoughts. And that was the plan. Anyway, however, I've cut the episode in two. We're going to hear from both the Joes, Rich and Carl, in another episode. And it's got more of a leaning around settings, talking about Spelljammer, picking up on the high-rise theme again, some catching up from Joe Salvador, and Rich Fraser talking about his note-taking techniques. And, you know, that ties in with world building and settings, in my opinion, and should make a nice little episode. Feel free to call in regarding those subjects if you've got things you might want to say. In the meantime, we're going to listen to the cut down episode that's really about gaming clubs and where I'm at with that, plus a little bit about oracy skills, presentation, improvisation. Still awesome bunch of call-ins. And it just means we're going to get another episode out of it. So I'm glad about that. Hope you are too.
Hey, Colin, Jason here. Great to hear you on the air again. You know, it's funny. We the ideas go around the anchor sphere, and similar thoughts are, it's just in the zeitgeist, I guess. But not a week ago, earlier this week, I was talking to somebody about coming on and doing a joint podcast, talking about improvisation. Role-playing is an improvisation thing where the GM and the players are improvising and using dice for, the random bits to the randomization parts, compared to the idea of using role-playing as a storytelling mechanism, using role-playing to tell a plotted-out story. And I'm looking forward to hosting that conversation in the future on my show. But it's interesting that you're talking about this on your show, so close together to my reaching out to that guest. And I 100% think, even if you prefer to run published modules, and even if you like to script everything out ahead of time, I think if you run some games, impromptu games that are totally improvised by you as the GM, I think it makes you a better GM. I do. And if you're not comfortable doing it for strangers, do it for friends. But, I've done that before. I've intentionally put myself in that spot where I've, reached out, got a random group of people. I didn't have a scenario set up. I had something roughly in my head, but I didn't have anything written down. I thought, I'm going to take the idea of this old movie and we're going to start rolling and then just go from there. And we just improvise off each other. And I'm not a great DM by any means, but doing exercises like that help build your chops and make it easier, make you respond faster. And I think they make you a better DM.
You mentioned presentation skills. I'm amazed, often astounded at looking at public figures in the United States. I don't know how, I don't follow UK politics, but particularly our political leaders, where someone who can just speak and present as though they're talking off the top of their head and just having a conversation with the people listening, as opposed to sounding like they're reading prepared notes or talking points. They can say the most outlandish, ridiculous crap, and American voters will eat it up and go, oh, that's the guy I'm voting for. where someone who is completely on point, well informed, well educated on the relevant topics of the day can be very dry and monotone, and people just hate him and don't want to. Oh, I don't want that. That's not the person I want to vote for. It's amazing. So, I think yes, there is something to not just knowing the information in terms, not just knowing your talking points that are on your PowerPoint slides or on your note cards or however you've sort of sketched out to organize your presentation, just being able to then present the information with enough flexibility and depth of knowledge that you can just explain it like you're having a conversation with the audience is much better. How that translates into D&D, if for me, is the box text. Some people love box text, some people hate box text. I like box text, but I never read it verbatim. I usually paraphrase and try to make it sound more natural, because particularly when it gets lengthy, it can become pretty bothersome to listen to someone read 2 paragraphs of box text straight off the page in a D&D module. So, yeah, making it sound much more like natural language, natural spoken language is always the best way to go.
This idea of oracy as a skill, something that you practice, you take time to kind of develop. If you see a value in it, of course, not everybody's going to see a value in it, but I think, and Jason was touching on it there, for a GM, especially if you're going to conventions, and maybe that they can get pretty loud. If you've got a really good, well rehearsed presentation style, should we say, and technique, that's gonna do you a big favour. We as teachers, we actually did a 1 day of training with a voice coach, because the profession is regarded as a profession of what do they call them? Vocal performers, I believe, is the category, and lots of teachers do in fact struggle with voice issues, losing their voice, straining their vocal cords. And what a lot of people don't realise is when you strain your vocal cords, there's actual bleeding, internal bleeding that you can't feel going on, and it's something you need to consider if you're using your voice a lot. And how many GMs and referees come back from conventions and they've lost their voice. The whole improvisation thing as well, I believe that, as once again Jason pointed out, we can develop our skills through practice, and if that's something you want to go for, the only way you're going to get better is to keep practicing and trying to improve and push yourself. My public speaking of late has, I think, taken a bit of a downturn in some aspects. I seem to get more of an issue with nerves in recent years, and I've got no idea why. And at times it's a little bit concerning, as though there may be some kind of degeneration going on. But you can't let things like that worry you. I feel you've got to I feel I want to push back and just try and hone them skills, and I don't know, counteract anything that may be going on there.
Hi Colin, hope you're doing well. Goblins, Henchman here. So you're asking about games for kids. I mean, I don't know actually, but my instincts tell me that you want to go 5e. I think that brand name appeal will bring in the punters, as it were, and then maybe after that, maybe segue to something else. I mean, it sounds like your issue with 5e is that you've had enough of it, and fair enough. But I reckon if you put posters around school saying D&D club, you'll get takers. If you put posters up saying RPG club or Beyond the Wall or something else, you might not get a broad appeal. But maybe you don't want too big a group, so maybe that's the thing. I'm almost sure that Che did something similar, put D&D up, and he got people coming in, whereas before he didn't. I may be misremembering that. But anyway, that's my shillings worth, as it were.
Hey Colin, this is Rob, also known as Menion, of Confessions of a Wee Timorous Bushi. It's really good to hear that you're getting on well with the school, particularly the special needs students, if that's what they're called. That sounds like a really great experience and a good working environment. I'm sure it's also, has its tough side as well. But that sounds like a great setup they've got going there. As for the games, I don't have any advice because I'm not a teacher, so I can't really tell you whether you should start a game at school or not. Hopefully somebody like Che or one of the teachers running games on Twitter might be able to offer some real advice. But all the best with that. System-wise, that's a tricky one, isn't it? Oh, let me think. I'm not sure, but I do like your thinking that it might not be the case that they want to play something like D&D. There may be other games that more like, are more appropriate to their needs and interests. So that's a really good one. And I think another point that you raise, which is good or really important, is you don't want to put any kind of like burden, particularly an economic burden on these kids, because the games, like as you point out, are extraordinarily expensive. And you can get stuff free, but the expectation is to then go on to spend a huge amount of money, right? So I would say basic fantasy role playing, because it's all free and you can get cheap prints. But D&D, do they want to do that? So I don't know. There's definitely some thinking to be done here. Anyway, good luck.
I just wanted to jump in here and echo what Rob's saying. I don't think I emphasised this enough initially, the importance of keeping the cost of this club down and the potential cost to the members. It really needs to be negligible, if not totally zero. So that is at the forefront of my mind. I've definitely got to go with a system that I can produce a booklet for or reproduce in some way without having a problem. And free products that you get from some of the big companies, if they are just a kind of a gateway drug, I need to turn away from that a little bit, I think. But let's carry on. There's plenty more to be said about gaming with kids.
Hey Colin, it's BJ. Obviously I haven't run any formalized clubs for kids, but I've played D&D with kids off and on now for the last 3 or 4 years. I got another group I'm about to start up here in a few weeks once everybody gets through with their summer vacation. One of the things I noticed about playing with kids, and it's kind of a generational thing. It's not kids in general. It's the people who are kids right now that maybe some old grognards like us need to keep in mind is their reference point for fantasy is not our reference point for fantasy. If they've seen The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, they've probably consumed it through movies as opposed to reading the books. As far as like Fritz Lieber and Robert Howard's Conan and Elric and those things, those are not where they have taken an interest in fantasy. Their reference points are going to be young adult fiction, Harry Potter being the big one, but also things like Percy Jackson and stuff like that. So I think they're probably looking to play young adults and not kids, although I could be wrong. You just have to ask the kids and see that. But I think young adult fiction is going to be a primary source of their what they conceive of fantasy to be. So maybe who knows? They might like the grimdark stuff. I know. I think Warhammer probably has a bigger presence over in the UK than it does here. But the kids I play with, they're not looking for the grimdark the way we might have been. They're looking for something a little more. Oh, Harry Potter has its dark elements, but something a lot more like that. Also, Marvel superhero movies and Star Wars, I think, factor big in their ideas as well. And I guess I say all that to just know, got to be aware where they may be coming from in their ideas of what constitutes fantasy. It's maybe a little more fanciful and a little less grim and gritty than and you may know that because you're you have a kid, you have your own kids, you know, you've been playing with your son, you're getting to know these kids, you know, in your new role as a teacher before you've launched the game. So you may be completely aware of it. I think that's something a lot of people our age take for granted, that the kids who want to get into D&D love the fantasy we loved when they were at their age, and we forget that it's been, you know, decades since then, and there's been a lot more different types of fantasy come out, and of course video games and anime as well. I mean, some of them of course they've been exposed to World of Warcraft and Skyrim, but you know, the Legend of Zelda features pretty huge for them in fantasy. But then again, Stranger Things, they might be interested in some horror elements. Anyway, as far as a system, if I was going to try to introduce it and not go with 5e, you might consider just white box fantasy role playing, which is the current iteration of Swords and Wizardry white box. It's very, I mean, it covers all the fantasy tropes. It's very easy for a guy with your level of experience to maybe tweak and add or adjust some of the elements to suit your tastes. But it's just got that very basic, and it's still enough of D&D that if you play it, you can kind of recognize when you play other versions and variants of D&D, kind of the connections there. So I might be considered to go with white box fantasy role playing for a group of kids where you just want to get them used to the idea of fantasy role playing.
As for what to play for your school club, I will defer to Che Webster and those other experts in the field. I know there's that desire to do 5e because that's what the kids hear about and they see and their friends talk about. So that's just what they are going to gear towards. I know that's something Che's talked about in the past. I don't know how true that is because he's gotten them playing other games too. ICRPG definitely is a great game to introduce people to the hobby. There's, a lot to it. Not like super hard to learn, but, it's more in depth than it looks and it really works well. So I really like ICRPG. And the other thing about ICRPG is it'd be great for bringing people in and out. The open table kind of game compared to Beyond the Wall. There's more collaborative stuff there. So I wonder how easy that would be for new people showing up every week. I don't know because I've never run it.
So loads of great ideas there. And I've left Jason's call in to last because a point he raised and I'd not considered, it really struck me, was this idea that Beyond the Wall's got that whole collaborative storytelling, making the village up at the beginning, making your stories. And yeah, that could be an issue because it's very likely that play is going to be a little bit drop in, drop out, loads of issues around kids being needed for different things. We've got so many after school activities, performances. It's a really active schedule of clubs and things. I can see regularity being tricky. So excellent point, and big thanks to Jason for jogging my memory on that one. I've actually now built a Google class, and I've floated out, so I'm calling it Maze Rats is the classroom. I'm thinking about Maze Runner and that fiction, which ties into this kind of, I don't know, maybe like the horror aspects that BJ was talking about, and it's quite a popular IP that I'm hearing mentioned around the school. I've also added in Trickster's Net, Barney's creation, because, he actually had kids on board with that one, and he jogged my memory about that, and I thought, oh yeah, that would totally make sense. I've got some Nature Maze stuff because his games are so light and simple. I thought for a quick pickup game, or to perhaps even just get the concept of an RPG, or as I'm branding it, or I'm selling it as adventure gaming, just really that. Adventure gaming, something like Prol, you're just using a coin, you're flicking a coin. Then there's some other games been mentioned recently by somebody, in I think it was Spencer actually mentioned Cairn. I've looked at that. It's a kind of fairy tale-y, kind of whimsical version of Into the Odd. I haven't put that one up yet, but I might do that. I think I'll put Maze Rats up purely for the tables. And when I say I've put it up, I've got the kids have got links to my account, my drive, where I've got my RPG products, so they can go in and have a look through all that stuff. And I said before, ICRPG, such an awesome amount of token and card resources, so they got all access to that. I've included some VTTs, so there's a link to Owlbear Rodeo and the ICRPG VTT. So at the minute, I'm just seeing what they're making of it. I've had some comments back where they're like, "Oh, what's this? What's this about?" And I'm well, take a look, guys. See if you can figure it out. Let me know what you think, just to hook them into it a little bit, make it a little bit more exciting. So yeah, it's good. It's underway. No actual games played at this point, though. And that, as they say, is a wrap. Big thanks goes out to you, the listener, for taking a bit of time out of your day to listen to old Spike Pit. Take care, and I'll catch you later.